learning meets business. I really love this topic. I've been on both sides of the table, designing learning programs, but as well as being in execution and leadership teams on the business side. I stumbled into most of the things that I'm doing, so it's just kind of fascinating that all the things that I will talk about today is more like observations or like insights that have come to me as I've been working with the business. But first, a little bit about me. I say that I'm making a living currently from being an imposter. I do a few different things. I'm a facilitator and a business coach for startups, but I'm also sometimes I work as a chef. This is me in the kitchen last week when we had an event. I also am like the boring stuff, entrepreneur, designer, marketer, and strategist. Yeah. So learning meets business, back to the topic. So I figured if we are learning, most of us in this room, I guess, then who is business? So I've often felt like we often talk about the business as the CEO, the management, but honestly, for me, it's everyone that we are working with. Everyone who works towards the company's mission, everyone who's working towards working on tasks that actively bring in the money, right? So it could be one user or one learner sitting in a remote office in northern Sweden in a little cabin, but it also could be an intern or just a regular professional level person. So we have to think of this as not just top down and not just a focus on leadership. Sorry, I'm just going to mute this person. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it is a little bit about looking at it quite holistically. Oops, that's not moving. So a little question. Why do we struggle to be a part of the business? I put a few things down here, but feel free to just drop a few more ideas down in the chat. What problems have you observed? For me, it's often relevancy of our material or the program itself. We speak different languages in terms of like our corporate language. We have limited visibility on either side of the tasks and the work. The pace, cycles, nature of the work is a little bit different maybe. So how we work, and basically many other problems of being an out-group. So I'll just pause here for a second if you can just drop other things that you might have observed in your companies. You can just put it in the chat. Don't make money, exactly. Yeah. And that's also quite important, like we're never prioritized. So how do we make ourselves a priority or at least rise up a little bit, right? Like, yeah. Anyone else? Results are not automatic and obvious. I would tie this in maybe with like that our cycles and nature of our work are a bit different. That it's just maybe that we don't look at results in the same way that someone else does, right? So yeah, a cost unit. Yeah, exactly. So I thought like for this session, instead of me focusing on like the things like metrics, and I started there, and then I thought, no, let me rethink, like talk about more of the relationship that we build with these people, because everyone is a person at the end of the day. Like we are people and they are people, and we're building relationships in a very human world. So I want to focus on that a lot in this session today. And then, yeah, maybe a little bit about the boring stuff like metrics and stuff. But yeah. So what do we really want? We've all heard these things. Don't be an order taker, win the trust, get a seat at the table. Oh my God, like I'm so tired of hearing it, but like, how do we actually do it, right? So if you try to dig a little deeper and go down like a why ladder, so why do we need to do, or why do we want to be closer to the business? How would it help you? And you can write that in the chat as well. Trust, so we can support better. Exactly. I think at the end of the day, like our needs are the same as everyone else's needs, that we just want to be seen and heard and be able to contribute, right? Like be useful, serve the business, be taken seriously, to show the impact and to think like, oh, because we know that our work can have so much impact. So it's more about letting them know, if only they knew how good this would be, if only they followed our material and used the things, what would it look like? So, yeah. So I had three kind of observations that guide me. I mean, I don't know what to call them. Maybe principles, facts, observations, something. But for me, like this is what's in my mind. Like when I think about how to create a training material or just build a program of any sort. So the first one is that learning designers, we're strategists, we're facilitators, and we're connectors. And that's our super strength, to kind of bring people together. We can read between the lines. We can facilitate not just programs, but actually like the cross-functional workplace experience. So trying to insert ourselves there. How do we do that? Be a spider in the web, learn a little bit about a lot of parts of the business. For me, I know that this really helped me because in the last company, I did actually hold different roles in the company. So I did get an insight into being a designer, being a head of team, being in the marketing team, and so on. I know maybe it's not easy for everyone else to actually have those different roles in the company, but try to think of how you could get there, like get under the skin, get into the mind of people around you. So you don't need to have like the deepest insight knowledge. We're not telling you to go out and do the work, right? It's more a broad understanding of what connects with what. So some of my tips are like, think about the jargon you use. Sometimes we're so stuck in our L&D jargon, or they are stuck in their corporate jargon, and let's meet somewhere in the middle. Like when I joined this marketing agency that I talk about, there was marketing abbreviations being thrown around all the time. I had no idea what it was, what they were talking about, and it took a while. But then the reward of knowing what all those metrics actually meant was so fulfilling, because it actually made people trust me more. Other questions you can ask yourself. So how does information flow? Like what is the unsaid? What is invisible? So usually, like we know through the org chart and all this, all of our documentation, we know the official formal lines, right? But what about the invisible, informal structure? So how does information flow? Who do they ask for help? What tech stack do they already use? So is it something that we can leverage ourselves rather than, adding something new, something more niched into the tools that we use? Speaking of tools, the second thing that I like to think of is focusing on the outcomes, not the tools. So start at knowing where you're going and what you need to get there from A to B. And be narrow in this focus. So it could be, usually it's some sort of change that we're trying to work out. And those are really hard things to do. So for example, it could be that you're trying to get a new process to be adopted, a new mindset, maybe break a certain habit, and so on. I would suggest that, choosing one and emphasizing it. I feel like this is something that I didn't do enough. Maybe I should have, it was always so many things going on at the same time. And I feel like maybe many of you can relate to that. But what would it look like if we could just choose one thing for a short amount of time and really double down on everything? All initiatives lead to that one new process. Getting stakeholder buy-in for just that one process. And I think things would look very different. So this is one way of how you can prioritize and get yourself raised in their eyes as well. Then the third thing in this is avoid over-facilitation. Over time, I've met so many people who are pretty skeptical of this whole facilitation game. And they're like, oh, another check-in, another tool, another framework, but like not able to really see what we're actually, what value that brings. So I think use that skill. We have the skills in our toolkit, but use the facilitative approach rather than, orchestrating a whole well-planned situation. Allow for a little bit of chaos. I say like sneak it in, And that could look like, of course, like, our favorite, listen and ask questions. Simple, easy to say, everyone says it, but it does go a long way. And this could be asking the questions very casually. It doesn't need to be a survey or a formal tool. I used to, for example, like going on like post-lunch walks, usually organized by someone else in the company, and I just tag along. And again, this gave me a lot of insight into knowing like what are people talking about, or what is who hangs out with whom, and how does information flow, and so on. Prepare to improvise. So sometimes I go into a session knowing that I will improvise, so I have my plan set out, and I'll go in there and be like, and make it look casual, make it look effortless, and say, oh, well, let's try this. But you actually have the plan, so I'm not taking away from the effort that it takes us to do this, but I think it reaches the skeptical people a little bit maybe better. Yeah. And then think about like what a non-workshop or what a non-traditional solution might look like, and this could be like anything from, like for a new tool, a few years ago, I said, okay, let's do like a launch party, like just an internal one. Celebration was quite strongly in the rituals of the culture. So I thought, okay, instead of just a regular Friday after work happy hour, let's focus it on this new tool, make it a little bit learning focused. So you could do things like that, and so on. Yeah. So be creative here. Then my second observation. I mean, everyone has their stuff to do, like we're getting busier. All of these tools are helping us, but they're not helping us necessarily have more free time. They're making us do more things in the same amount of time with the belief that things are going faster and easier. So yeah, so I think just allowing for people to be a little bit. So understand the current climate of the company. I think this is so important. Observe, listen, ask, be curious, and this is more about the here and now. So, for example, questions I like to have an eye out on when I'm in a company. So, like to understand what is causing stress. Which account is on target. What is business as usual, or what is in flux? What are the changes taking place? What is being talked about? At my last company, there was one person who, you just knew when the company was stressed, because if he was stressed, everyone around him was stressed. So to know that information was very useful, because then I could adapt and know that, okay, my next session on Thursday, this one, people are probably going to drop off early, and I change the schedule or agenda and plan for that. Yeah, there's someone saying, what is keeping you up all night? Exactly. And this is something you can also just pick up through the casual conversation. So what is being talked about at the lunch table? It doesn't have to be a formal question that you ask, but just trying to get a pulse of what is happening around you and around the business. What I used to also do sometimes is, just attend, be part of certain Slack channels, or be part of certain meetings. Of course, you ask if you can do that, but most often people don't mind. They just say, "Yeah, join. You can observe," and you'll hear more through that than through asking questions. The next one, act like a consultant. So this is about delivering value regularly. You wouldn't work with a consultant if they don't show you their value regularly, if it's something that is just once in 6 months or once a year, right? Like, so what are these small moments of value add that you have throughout your relationship or your partnership? And then this gives you also the ability to identify and define problems or bottlenecks. Spend time in identifying and defining rather than just jumping to a solution. And then share the progress regularly, whether it is in a report form or whatever. And here I say, whatever the company is used to. So as a marketing agency, we were used to sending reports to the client on a weekly basis, like short ones. So using that formula or that tool that was already in the company's understanding can go a long way. So for example, this could mean syncing to the pace of the company. It could be, matching your sprint cycles, and so on. Knowing your content, being that person again, like being that spider in the web, going back to that point, helping them stay organized. So when someone comes to you and says, oh, do you have any material on, I don't know, feedback? For you to really know where things are and making it easy for them to find it, pinning documents in the right places, having an organized structure on your files, in your learning platform, and so on. And like I said, you can observe or attend meetings, basically see the work in action. Don't just rely on the surveys or the actual, like the Q&A. Go in and actually see what is happening on the floor. You could do quarterly business reviews, for example. So this again is an example just from what used to happen at my agency. If there's some sort of routine that exists in the company that you work on, just use that as a grounding and then build off that. And then lastly, don't always ask for permission. Like people don't have time. They're not gonna ask you, they don't always give you the perfect brief. So go out, get what you need, and, make your recommendations. Christina says, when asked to make a course on X, we would ask why until we got to the root cause. Exactly, like basically just understanding why. Like you want to deliver impact, you want to deliver value, and you just make it top of mind. Then relatability and relevancy. So adapt your narrative, metrics, examples, whatever it might be, to the business operations and do it in parallel. So you can, for example, use practical examples from their daily work. So if you're working with the creative team, adapt the content to challenges that a creative team might see, or tools or examples that they might see in their work. If you work with the analysts, change that to them. It does add a little bit of work on our side, but then it's worth the return that you get. Limit your L&D jargon, try to lean into theirs. Sometimes we call the same thing by different names. So, let's just try to find what else something is called. Like, what is this framework or this map or canvas or whatever. Speaking about the why again, so understanding why they're motivated or how they're motivated. So two people can be very happy doing the same course and need the same course, but like why they need it is wildly different. So try to find that out, and then you can adapt your narrative and try to sell it to them or get that stakeholder buy-in much easier. And then the last point, track metrics that are already in use. So here, I know that, was it Elena, Tom? I think yesterday someone did a very good session on metrics, so I don't want to stay too much on this point. You can look at hers. But basically, there's already things that are being tracked. And that again, that understanding, it shows just what they value in a company. And you can piggyback off that. And then the last kind of observation is we learn, therefore we are. I mean, like learning is going to take place, whether we do it or not. We are taking in so much information all the time. And for our learners at the workplace, it's they're learning on the job. They need to learn through the initiatives that you set up, but also through just life itself. So how do we make sure that we're able to compound the effects of our learning initiatives rather than just focus on like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm teaching, and that's all that it is, right? So building strategic relationships that actually lighten your load, and this could be with people that could advocate for you, could be a subject matter experts, your managers, anyone in the company, but that who has influence and who will help you influence. So the first thing, convert the skeptics. Try to do that. There's always a handful of people. I know that I worked with a few who came in saying, "Oh, you do the learning stuff. Oh, I've never attended a good learning session in my life. I don't think I would join so many sessions." And then they joined a couple and they were like, oh, this is actually really good, and then they became some of my strongest advocates in like fighting for like, why are we stealing this time? We need to have this protected time in the company for these sessions and so on. So they will give you a lot more than the people who are already in your corner. So try to find those ones. Look at who's trusted in the team. So how information flows, who trusts whom, and so on. And oftentimes this isn't just the manager, this is someone else on the floor. Be curious, get to know them casually. Again, like I really emphasize this. People say things a lot more without any barrier when they don't think you're gathering data on them, So, yeah. And try to connect with all levels of the organization, not just the leadership. The last one, embedding initiatives into existing workflows. So you want to try to get to this point of like learning by doing, finding learning moments that are just hidden in plain sight. So some of my favorites have been, for example, an onboarding process, like we're onboarding clients anyways. Is there something that I can stack to that process that will help them and will emphasize the learning journey anyways? Maybe there's a recurring meeting slot that, you can have like, okay, we'll add a new routine. In 5 minutes, we end the meeting with this question or this reflection or so on. And just stacking onto existing cultural routines. So how the company celebrates, or it could be fun stuff like that you just add on to. So yeah, so this is kind of where we're landing. I just want to wrap it up now. I hope I didn't speak too fast. I sometimes have a tendency to do so. But we have a few minutes, so you can ask questions. But I want to wrap it up by just leaving you with a few last notes. I feel like I said a lot of things, but there were a few common themes. So one, like find the skills to succeed in their organization and in their career, rather than focusing on more technical skills or more anything that is super niche, that's not going to have a long-term value. So let them go out and upskill themselves as well. So you want to maybe make them more pro learning. And then adding on to that is creating the conditions for self-learning and the sharing to flourish around you. So the environment, how things are set up, the structures, frameworks around that support learning. Build and implement in parallel to the business. So understand what's happening here and now, and then try to work in parallel or around that current challenge anyways. And then the last, remember why we do what we do, so really focus on the value, the outcome, and so on. Yeah, and then just a last question for the chat, so what mindset or behavior shift are you going to try to implement to meet the business? You can just drop it in the chat, but also thank you for listening. And this is my LinkedIn if you want to connect. Christina. Yes, you have a question.
Hiya. So I find that really interesting. Thank you. I just have a question around different perspectives, because what you said there about converting the skeptics is in contrast to other things that I've seen elsewhere. So, for example, Simon Sinek talks about the law of diffusion of innovation. So essentially focusing on the people who are a bit more willing, a bit more open-minded, and then working your way towards the more heavily critical skeptics and the laggards, I guess, so that you're not putting loads of effort and loads of time into converting somebody who is basically never going to convert, or is going to take a lot of effort to get there, when you could get everybody else on board up until that point. And then it becomes easier because, well, everybody else is doing it this way. So I guess from your experience, have you found, have you got any examples, I guess, of either converting a skeptic or converting everybody else until the skeptic follows along with everybody?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I come from a very much like a small business startup kind of, environment. So I think maybe for a big corporate, like things would look quite different in how you you explain it, maybe that works better, just because of course you can't put in that much time for like it's just not worth it maybe. For me, it was always like a handful of people that I could identify who'd be a little bit like, I know that they never show up to the sessions, or they are maybe, you know, grumbling, and you can hear their grumbling in the walls, and, you know, rallying the troops almost to be like, oh, this was a bad session, or this is, but in reality, it wasn't a bad session. And I know that there's many other people who liked it, you know, like, and saw value, but they were more easily influenced by this loudest person in the room. So I think for me, it was just finding, again, going back to like making sure that it's relevant. Of course, I'm not pandering only to that one person, but making sure that there is relevancy. We are connecting it, like the examples are correct. There's actually, you're tying it in with the stakeholder buy-in. So making sure that their manager says, no, we're actually putting this time aside, same with the CEO. And all of that, you know, then it helped and it worked out. But I definitely see that it's not worth in every situation, and maybe not like even possible. Like it's not, every skeptic isn't going to be converted. So these are the people who I know that I developed a good relationship with. Otherwise, we could banter. I could, you know, call them out when they said things that I didn't think were true. So I think it took a lot of all of that, like rather than designing the program for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.